Good morning, everybody. We're going to talk about the ToE equation as usual, but I want to try to make this a little bit easier on everybody. You got to understand that no matter who I speak with, I'm speaking to people on different intellectual levels who have different skills, different comprehension levels of every field. Um, when you start getting into the meat of this, I see how it's all connected, and I start throwing out data, and I think it confuses some people. I mean, I get it; it's a lot, but the idea here is that I want to try to comprehensively explain this bit by bit, so that everybody genuinely understands what this is about. Um, so, what I want to do now, starting off, is explain what the ToE equation is and why it was either possible or not. Um, the ToE equation, the theory of everything, for decades now, it's the holy grail of science. It truly is. I mean, if you're looking for the holy grail of science, it is the ToE equation. It's undeniable. What it is one equation that explains everything, that can be applied to anything. Okay? It is a basic fundamental structure, as Dr. Kaku called it. I call it a universal blueprint. Same. Okay? Um, the idea of the ToE equation was, man, it's hard to really stress this to people how deep it is, but it was the idea of God versus religion versus atheism, at the very least. So the premise is that if there is no order, there's only chaos. It's all random. There's no God because it's all random. Okay? That there would be no structure. But, and this has been agreed upon by the entire scientific community, nobody's even denied this. For years and years, the idea was that if you could prove order, if you could prove that the rules themselves are orderly, that there is God, there is a creator, okay? This will end up causing even more discussions over what God is, what religion is correct, or any of this other stuff. I'm trying to focus on the meat, the details, the science, specifically the stuff that is easy to digest. As the ToE equation in general is understood by most, it's proof of a creator, proof of intelligent design. That's the premise of the theory of everything, is that there would be an equation, something that would prove order, that it is not all just random chaos, okay? It's the general premise. What you get into after that is arguments. That's already accepted as the standard. What you get into after that are arguments over whether it's possible and how so. What I did in the last video was actually address exactly that. Later in the video, it's a couple simple things that actually show you the truth here. The rule of exceptions is a thing in physics. It's just how we validate our rules. All rules must have an exception to be valid. Okay. We have something else called Gödel's proof, which says that no set of axioms can prove its own consistency. This is the same as saying that a rule cannot validate itself. This is directly impacting the ToE equation. Rules have to exist concurrently. They have to exist at the same time. And where you end up with the rule of exceptions in Gödel's proof is the evidence for the ToE equation. That not only is it possible, it absolutely must exist in order for the rules that we have to be valid. The rule of exceptions, you can start on either side of the fence here, but the rule of exceptions, all rules must have an exception to be valid. Okay, that's a rule. It needs an exception. Why? Because of Gödel's proof that exists concurrently. A rule cannot validate itself. It can't be true because it says so, which creates a seeming paradox, but is actually not. So this rule cannot validate itself. No set of all rules must have an exception to be valid. And it can't validate itself because no rule can validate itself because of Gödel's proof. So what you end up with is the rule of exceptions has to have an exception. What is the exception to the rule that all rules have an exception? One rule with no exceptions. It has to exist, or the rule of exceptions is flawed. And it doesn't actually, it's not real, it's not true. Okay? So the other route, you start with no set of axioms can prove their own consistency. Okay, how do I validate that rule? With the rule of exceptions. So a rule can't validate itself. The rule, Gödel's rule, is telling you, I cannot validate myself. He's telling you that. So Gödel's proof says a rule cannot validate itself. Okay, well, how do I validate a rule? Back to the rule of exceptions. All rules must have an exception to be valid. Okay, well, there must be an exception to Gödel. What is the exception to the rule that no set of axioms can prove their own consistency? One set of axioms that does prove its own consistency, i.e., one rule with absolutely no exception. Are you seeing the connection here? So with the rule of exception, it has to be validated. You validate both the rule of exceptions and Gödel's proof with one rule that has no exception. One set of axioms that does prove its own consistency. Based on the rules that already exist, a ToE equation is not only possible, it is required. You understanding this? These rules have not been validated. Gödel's proof has never been validated because we never found an exception to it. The rule of exceptions has never been validated because we never found an exception to it. In order for either of these two rules to be true, there must be one rule with no exceptions, i.e., one set of axioms that proves their own consistency. It's mandatory. Based on their own verbiage, it's mandatory. So, going down the list, step one, what is the ToE equation? Proof of intelligent design, proof of a creator. The counter to the idea that everything is chaos. Okay? Well, how do we know if it actually exists? Based on the rules we already have, this one and this one, it has to exist. Whether you agree with my equation or not, it must exist. We've already established it with the existing rules that we have. Nobody was putting this together for some reason. And when I break things down and simplify them, understand I have broken them down and simplified them. Most people are looking at all this complexity and they get lost in the woods. They're missing certain key details because they're trying to follow specifically this rule and specifically this rule, and this must be, and this must, and they're missing the forest through the trees. This is very simple, but it wasn't simple to simplify. So, as you go down the list, you've answered what the ToE equation is now. You've answered whether or not it's possible. It's not just possible based on these rules. It is obligatory, mandatory, has to exist by proxy. It must be. So that question has been answered based on existent rules. I'm not just randomly pulling stuff out and saying, this is true because I said so. None of that has happened, okay? So now, what is the ToE equation at that point? What is it? Why did I come to any of my conclusions? How did I get here to where I'm at? It starts with the logic that we already have. Dichotomy logic. If it exists, its equal opposite exists, right? And you all have to forgive me. I was on a health kick for months. Few injuries and some. I'm enjoying my monsters. I'm drinking a soda every now and then. I am not pushing myself the way that I was. I'm not falling off the wagon and just being an unhealthy jack off, but I am loosening up. So now, why am I at the point that I feel this is the solution? You get into dichotomy logic. Once you start studying physics, mathematics, chemistry, any of this stuff, you realize the rule of equal opposites. If it exists, if there's men, there's women. If there's women, there's men. If there's up, there's down. If there's yes, there's no. These are simple concepts. What we did was, partially because of flaws in mirrored 2D to 4D geometry, what some people don't get, we didn't account for fusion. Third options. The compromise. It always exists. In all of science, in everything, there's always a third option. It's not even debated that there's a dichotomy. You understand? If I come out and I say that there's always a dichotomy, people say, well, yes, obviously, Okay, well, yes, obviously, there's always a third option. And you'll say, some of these field specialists, etc., they'll say, well, why? What do you mean there's always a third option? If there's yes and there's no, maybe exist. There's a third option, maybe exist. Maybe is neither yes or no. But it does exist because they do. You can't get a maybe unless yes and no exist, okay? But maybe is a singular option in and of itself. Maybe. Could lean yes, could lean no. The greatest physical example I have to explain this to people is with gender. No, the left isn't right that there's 1,000 genders, and the right isn't right that there's only 2 genders. There are 3, because you have to account for fusion. The hermaphrodite, okay? And as I've said previously in other videos, we all start off as hermaphroditic. But if think in terms of yes and no and maybe equals choice, okay? Choice is the collective of the options. Yes and no and maybe equals choice. Okay. Boy, girl, hermaphrodite equals gender. Is a hermaphrodite 2 babies? One baby. Both genders, 1 baby. Okay? This is the same as maybe. Both options, 1 choice. Okay? Maybe is the fusion option between yes and no. The hermaphrodite is the fusion option between men and women. It doesn't matter what field. It doesn't matter what subject. Okay? If there's a dichotomy, there will be this third option. And if you have these 3 options, you have a grouping of them, a collective. So if there's a yes, there's a no. If you got yes and no, you got maybe. If you got yes and no and maybe, you have a choice. Okay? If there's men, there's women. If there's men and women, you got hermaphrodites. Man, woman, hermaphrodite equals gender. Okay? You get into something like chemistry. If there's protons, there's neutrons. If there's protons and neutrons, you get an electron. You got protons, neutrons, and electrons, you got an atom. Same equation. The same, anyway, any field, any subject, anywhere you go, you're going to end up with the same thing. If there's a beginning, there's an end. If there's a beginning and an end, you have a middle. A middle is one option. Beginning, end, and middle equal your timeline. So the reason to address this too, the reason why I phrase things the way that I do, I say beginning and end plus middle instead of saying beginning, middle, end. It's about computer programming. It's about logic. It's about the actual function. If there's a beginning, there will be an end. You just don't know when it's happening yet. Okay? So the primary dichotomy is a beginning and an end. And because they exist, there's a third option, the middle, that could stop here, could stop here, could stop here. You don't know how long it's going to be. Boom, you're dead. Bringing me to my next point. Everybody's talking about things being a matter of life and death. It's a matter of birth and death. If there's birth, there will be death. You don't know when it's going to get here, but you got a life in between. Life is the third option that exists because birth and death exist. Okay? So in the grandiose scheme, you're not trying to beat death. You should be trying to extend life. Like, I mean, really. But you have birth, you have death, and because there's birth and death, there's life. The third option. Well, birth, life, and death equals a lifespan. The same way beginning, middle, end equals a timeline. Your primary dichotomy is in every field. There will always be, if it exists, its equal opposite exists. But because they exist, extrapolate. There's always a third option that has to be accounted for. Okay? This is why the mere 2D to 4D geometry applied in physics does not function properly, because you're not accounting for fusion. You're not accounting for third options as singular things. What the math we use applied to physics does is it would cut an electron in half and say it's half proton, half neutron. Well, it only exists because they do. It doesn't matter. It is a singular dimension. The best verbiage I have for it is this: the proton is a particle, the neutron is the wave, the electron is the particle wave. And to try to understand that, the proton has a +1 charge. The neutron has a ±0 charge. They're equal opposite. This is the particle and the wave, okay? Think in terms of Tesla's language. So you end up with particle wave, and the electron is a particle wave. It's why you can't stop it. It doesn't matter if you keep slowing it down and slowing it down and slowing it down and slowing it down. You cannot stop it. You cannot actually freeze this electron particle, because it's not a particle. It's a particle wave. It is the fusion option, the third option. And geometrically even, this plays out the same way. The basic equation, the format does not change. So from biology, we'll do biology, chemistry, and geometry. In biology, you have a sperm and an egg that make a zygote. In chemistry, you have a proton and a neutron that make a nucleus. In geometry, you have a height and a width that make a plot. Every dichotomy has a singular result where you have proton, neutron making a nucleus, sperm and egg making a zygote, and a height and width making a plot. By proxy, automatically, if you have a zygote, you get a womb, the third option. In chemistry, if you have a nucleus, you get a valence shell. It's equal opposite. If you have a plot, you have a parameter. It's equal opposite. It doesn't matter whether you draw that circle or not. It exists. There is a maximum potential there. And there's some stuff that you can get into with Nash's equilibrium on the advanced stuff with that. Even the laws of thermodynamics apply with the chemistry and the biology of here. The zeroth law: two thermal systems in equilibrium with a third system are in equilibrium with each other. There's always a dichotomy. There's always a third option in these equilibriums. So whatever field you're dealing with, beginning, middle, end equals timeline, birth, life, death equals lifespan, yes, no, and maybe equal choice. It doesn't matter. There's always a third option. And when you understand and can visualize a string without pretending that everything is literally a string for string theory, and it gets crazy, especially when you get into people that believe in one electron theory. All logic goes out the window, all formatting, all the parameters get lost, and everybody just starts talking about this vague what-if environment. The truth of the matter is, if you understand a string, like if you can think of a string as point A, point B, and a connecting line, then you can understand how there is always a third option, and it can't be treated as two things. So the middle of a book is not half beginning and half end. It's not. It's the middle. Your life is not half birth and half death. It's the middle. Okay? It doesn't matter how you view it. It doesn't matter what field you prefer. But I don't know people on individual levels to be able to reach them in their language. So it's like I have to address all of it. I have to go subject by subject and explain all this different stuff. But all that considered, if the first thing is identifying what a ToE equation is supposed to be, we've done that. Okay. The second thing is identifying whether or not it is possible for it to exist. I have proven with the existing rules that it is mandatory that it exists. It's not just possible. It has to. Okay? That brings you to the third thing. What is it? Is, as I've already expressed, as I've already explained in my book. Matter of fact, give me 1 second here. Okay. This is the book, A Hand with the ToE. It has the equation on there. It's available on Amazon. Side note, I don't have my channel monetized. I don't allow advertising on here. I want to say whatever I want to say. I don't work for YouTube. Nobody's paying me. I'm not generating money. I'm not going to have them censor this and do that. I say what I want. So I don't make any money off of any of this stuff. I will make some money off the book. I have that. That's fine. I made that, etc. But as far as talking about all of this, discussing it, I'm not going to charge you for that, and I'm not going to turn it into a business so much as I can avoid it. I don't know, but I don't have commercials on here, no advertising, no anything. I will plug my book, though, relentlessly. I don't care. It's my channel. But as it goes, this is as simple as it gets, like, as far as a basic fundamental structure goes. And all I did was to explain the mere 2D to 4D geometry compared to what I did. It is a 3D equation. 3D equation. You've got your primary dichotomy right there. See that? 1A and 1B. You have a fusion option, a third option, a compromise, a hybrid, whatever you want to call it. That is a 1AB dimension. Then you have your generated result. And it is the collective of the individual components. It is the grouping of the individual components. Note there's an equal sign because equations have to have results. Even Einstein was smart enough to know that E equals mc squared. He had an E, then he had an equals, and then there was a result. I don't know what planet Dr. Cuckoo is from, how he came to hyperspace with no generated result. I don't know what planet Terrence Howard is coming from to sit here and say that he has the ToE equation with no generated result. An equation has a left side and a right side. It is not hard to comprehend. Like, you all are losing it. You're missing the forest through the trees. So open challenge to everybody from Elon Musk. It does not matter. Dr. Cuckoo, Neil deGrasse Tyson, we can talk about all of this all day. It does not matter. Congressman Thomas Massey, I'd love to discuss it with him. But open challenge to everybody. If you can find me a dichotomy that does not have a third option, there's just no third option, then you can tell me I'm an idiot. But so far, I'm addressing chemistry, biology, geometry. I've gone down the list with everything on my own, and I'm batting 1,000. At some point, somebody needs to prove me wrong or accept defeat. It could be a victory for all of us. You understand? When it comes to the equation, everything has been answered. Everything has been addressed. I've gone down the list. I've gotten into Einstein's light observations as applied to the theory of general relativity and why this and why that and why space-time makes no sense as a term. I've gone through all of this different stuff. I've studied every bit of it. It is supposed to be a basic fundamental structure that applies to everything. And with it, you can do physics better. They have to get away from mirror 2D to 4D geometry. It cuts a middle in half and treats it as two separate things. A hermaphrodite is one baby. It doesn't matter that it's both genders. To get a little bit further into this, to go down the engineering chain and explain how it extrapolates and how it's true, and maybe what's causing the problem with people in regards to gender. And there's 1,000 genders. This is as simple as the gender gets, and it's the best way to explain the breakdown. For a lot of people don't know chemistry, etc. So with gender, the basic format like that: man, woman, hermaphrodite equals gender. Okay, well, there's three things. And you're like, well, what about this kind of man? What about that kind of woman? What about this? Rules are about maximum potential. We are talking about the basic fundamental structure of all things. There are three genders, just three: men, women, and hermaphrodite, okay? You have to account for the hermaphrodite. I'm tired of there's two genders to counter the left. It does not matter. I don't lie. I'm not going to just scream at the sky that there's two genders because I want to argue against the 1,000 gender, and I don't think people are going to understand what I'm talking. I'm just going to give you the data. And the data is that there's always a third option, the hermaphrodite. And like it or not, we even all start off as hermaphrodites. You need the man and the woman to make a baby. We all start off as hermaphroditic and grow toward. You have object yield, force yield, or fusion, the third option that Newton incidentally discounted. When you break this down, how do you get all these other gender things? Well, this is about masculine man, feminine female, masculine male, maximum potential, the manliest man, the most womanly woman, okay? And the hermaphrodite would be completely non-distinct in a perfect world. The third option, the fusion, it would not lean male or female, okay? You can break these down. So the man has three options. You can have the masculine male, the feminine male, or the non-distinct male. Neither masculine nor feminine. Three options. You end up on the female side, again, man, woman, hermaphrodite. With woman, you have the feminine female, maximum potential, masculine female, minimum potential for the female, or non-distinct female. She's neither really masculine nor feminine. They still break down into three things. The hermaphrodite, well, the truest hermaphrodite is non-distinct. It doesn't lean either way. And then you have a masculine-leaning hermaphrodite and a feminine-leaning hermaphrodite. This is not complicated. It can get intricate. It can get complex, but it's not complicated. It's not difficult to comprehend when it's actually understood. And like when you can actually break it down in a way that can be understood. So there are three genders. It's the same as anything else. You can keep breaking down data. So when you get into something like chemistry, you know, the molecule is made up of isotopes, cations, and anions, the three types of atoms. Atoms can be broken down. Then the subatoms can be broken down. But even better than that, the same way that when you focus on man, woman, hermaphrodite, and you want to break down the male, so you have masculine male, feminine male, and the non-distinct, those would be self-equal opposites, an extrapolation, an extension thereof, whatever. It's just maintaining if it exists, its equal opposite exists. If that exists, its equal opposite exists, etc. to the nth. Where you end up with in chemistry is you've got protons, neutrons, and electrons, right? Well, the proton has the antiproton. The electron has the positron that is equal opposite. Those will break down into three different. You see what I'm saying? It does not matter. You can keep extrapolating data, but you have to maintain your dimensional parameters. You have to say, we are talking about gender. Okay, gender breaks down into men, women, and hermaphrodites. Or you have to say we're talking about men. Okay, well, men break down into masculine men, feminine men, or non-distinct. The dimensional parameters matter. What is your grouping? What is the subject matter? What is it specifically that you were discussing? And then you break down the data from there. So again, I know that some of this gets very intricate and it can seem overwhelming even just listening to it. I've got the benefit of I deal with this stuff all day, every day. I'm randomly throughout the day just looking something up and going, study that for a while. It's who I am. It's what I do. So I get it. It's easier for me because I've surrounded myself with all of the data and I've studied all this relentlessly. But it is not complicated. I'm going to make a regular habit of doing these videos. I'm not sure of which subject I'm going to do next or how I'm going to handle this or what. I'm trying to sort out a format with this and get to a point where I'm very consistent and orderly and going from A to B to C to Z. It's the theory of everything. And there's so many different things that have to be addressed with this that I'm going to I'm going to float around all over the place with it, trying to get the point across. But it's because I have to address all of these little things from here to there. Newton's second law of motion. People, the same way that they'll use Gödel or this or that and think they got me until they hear a response. Newton's second law of motion. In the absence of external forces, when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object, one must yield to the other. Is he right? By his own account, no. The intent was that yield will occur no matter what. And since you're dealing with two different things, the idea is that something's got to give, right? All of that completely discounts fusion by accident, okay? When he said one must yield to the other, the statement he intended to make, what he actually intended, and made sense if you're not thinking about fusion, is that yield will occur. That allows for fusion. That properly accounts for fusion, okay? So his second law of motion, when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object, one must yield to the other. No, yield will occur. You can have force yield, you can have object yield, or you can have fusion, the third option. And so it's not that Newton's work disagrees with anything in the physics. His verbiage incidentally did. The way that he phrased it, because he didn't know to account for fusion. I mean, if you're just smashing two things together of different, material, one of them's going to give. That's the way you're thinking about it. When you're dealing with physics in general, and we know that fusion exists, we know a hermaphrodite exists. The hermaphrodite is not one yielding to the other. The hermaphrodite is fusion. Okay, so yield still occurs no matter what, but it does not go either way automatically. And so it's odd to say that Newton was wrong, but only because of bad verbiage, not because he was wrong about the physics principles that he was proving. He proved yield will occur. He phrased that badly. It's not hard. So anybody that understands any of that kind of work, I think you'll get exactly where I'm coming from as far as fusion and why this is so important. But a lot of people, they're just like, Newton's second law of motion, who knows? Yeah, he thinks he corrected Newton. Not really. I corrected his verbiage. I didn't prove him wrong in that sense. I just proved that you have to account for fusion, and his verbiage didn't allow that. So I'm going to probably leave that there for today. But I am, like I said, I am sorting out formats. I'm sorting out how I want to move forward with all this. As usual, there will be a link to the book in the description. If you want to support me, that's much appreciated. If not, just follow me on X. And I'll start leaving links to all that in these videos. But follow me on X, follow me on Facebook, follow me here, follow me there. I might have different ads or something. I'll have to, again, put it in the comments. But any sharing the content helps. And there will be regular podcasts at some point. I'm still in the middle of trying to sort this out. I don't know anybody locally that does this stuff. So trying to do it on my own, I'm just talking to myself. I would like a back and forth with somebody on a regular basis. But yeah, there's more in the works. There will be podcasts coming, and I will be segregating this data a little bit and trying to do subject by subject, and sort of separate the people that like math more than this or like chemistry more than this. Or it's difficult trying to find the correct route to proceed, and so I'm just kind of stumping through it. But I will talk to you guys again soon, and I'm trying to think if I've left anything out for today. I don't know. Well, I will say this on the book. There are a couple chapters in there that some people have been like, why was that with the book? I did a chapter on the Roman dodecahedron because it was brought to my attention. Somebody wanted me to address it. They were almost being a smartass about it, like, oh yeah, figure that out. And I was like, yeah, that's easy. But I did the chapter on the Roman dodecahedron, but the dodecahedron, as Terrence Howard ended up addressing in his video, there are some geometrical implications with that. There are certain things about science and physics that it is an important shape, and I recognized that long ago. but also there's a chapter on game theory with Nash's equilibrium that isn't really addressing the ToE equation, same as the Roman dodecahedron chapter, but it is addressing the equilibrium work that the ToE equation is a part of. You understand? He dealt with equilibriums, and I needed to sort of address some of the differences between his work and mine, and some of the similarities, why it was so intertwined. And how it works applied, like when you actually apply Nash's equilibrium. So it wasn't so out of place for the work. It's related, but it was a little bit away from the ToE equation. Uh, I felt like it needed to be addressed. All that said, I will get in touch with you all. I don't know if I'll be back on here tomorrow. I want to try to do a daily thing and set up a Q&A of some sorts, but I need to build up the following a little bit more so I'm not just wasting my time. There will be more coming out though over the next week or so. I will at least have, I know of one video I'm planning to do in the next couple of days. I don't know when, but I will be having more videos come out more regularly. But thanks, guys.